Joining the podcast this week is Chris Mattson, an investigator for the FWC. We have a great conversation about what is and isn't allowed on the reefs here in the Florida Keys. Thank you to Jordi, a local spearfishing guide, for sitting in as a co-host this week. I'm your host, Tyler, and this is the Anchor Lines Podcast. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us. Before we kind of hop into this, I do want to put the majority of the time on kind of talking about rules and regulations that the FWC has here in the Florida Keys, and either why they are the way they are or just a better understanding of them, because I know people have questions constantly, and a lot of times we don't have the phone number to call and ask, or nobody takes the time to do it.
Or that.
Before I get into that, I want to kind of know your story, your background.
Sure.
You know, where's the first time you got introduced to the ocean, being on a boat, and what made you want to take that all the way to being an investigator for the FWC?
Well, I actually wasn't born down here, but we moved down here in 1980.
Okay.
And I grew up down in the lower Keys, and I didn't even know how to swim. So I knew how to swim by putting a life jacket on in my canal and progressed through that as far as getting comfortable in the water. And at about 15, I learned how to dive. So I had progressed from not being comfortable in the water at all to being an open water diver. So then I just got into kind of spearfishing and lobstering and things like that, being down there, because growing up down here, you're pretty limited as far as being a kid. You know, there's not a lot of activities as far as other than boating. So you got to kind of do what you can to stay out of trouble.
Yeah, there ain't a bowling alley and a roller rink, right?
Yeah, that was back in the day.
Yeah.
You know, so, and after that, I went to college and didn't really know what I wanted to study. And I worked at a dive shop in between. And I was like, oh, I'm a scuba diver. I can work at a dive shop. And they were like, oh, you're an open water diver? Yeah, maybe we can give you a job. So I got up in advanced and rescue and things like that. And then I went to school and came back because I didn't know what I wanted to study. So I got an instructor cert. So I'm actually a PADI certified scuba instructor.
Oh, awesome.
And I worked from dating myself from 1994 to 97. As a scuba instructor.
Here in the Keys?
Yeah, in the Keys, in the lower Keys, Key West and Ramrod. And then I actually had a friend that I grew up with and graduated with in high school that his dad worked for the Marine Patrol. And so he was on Cudjoe, and I would see his patrol boat behind the house. And I was like, you know what? That's a pretty cool job. So I put myself through a police academy, and at the time, they weren't hiring after I graduated and everything like that. So, and it was really, really hard to get into the state at that time as well, because you had to still go, even if you were certified law enforcement, you still had to go through the state of Florida's thing because they wanted to make sure you were up to their standards. So I went in the military in 98, and my whole goal once I got out of the military was to come work for FWC.
Okay.
So I was a cop in the military for 4.5 years. And when 9/11 happened, I got stop lost. So I was supposed to get out in April of 2002, but I was held back for another 6 months because of what's called stop loss, where they don't allow you to get out. And it actually worked in my favor because I was applying for FWC and things like that, and I went through all the physical stuff and the, the interviews and everything medical, and then I got out of the military because I was stationed in California, drove across. I was off for about a month and then getting paid through the military, and then went right into FWC. And I've been since 2002 in October.
Awesome.
And I worked patrol for many years in a marked unit and in uniform. And then BUIs were my specialty then. And I've been, not to pump myself up, but I've been, honored by MAD and things like that about 3 or 4 times. And I just got into, obviously, the resource aspect as well. And about 2017 is when I promoted to investigations. And I've been in investigations ever since. At that time, I was what's called a boating accident investigator, which you investigate all the fatalities and things like that, the fatal boating accidents and the serious bodily injuries. And now I transitioned in 2019 to my current spot, which is a resource investigator. So that's what I've been doing ever since 2019.
All right. So to be clear, resources, we're talking about natural resources,
yes,
things like that throughout the Keys. Our
yes.
fish populations, our
fish,
coral,
lobster, commercial fishing, internet crimes, anything people posting online. We look into things like that.
Yeah. So until you said that a few minutes before you got here, I had no idea you were doing an internet crime investigation using social media to figure out kind of what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, what a funny thing to think about. How often we probably brag or literally throw ourselves under the bus.
Yeah.
By posting something online.
I mean, a lot of it goes unfounded as far as, say he went out and shot a permit and you saw it online and, permit is legal to spear in federal waters, but it's not in state. So, we have to prove, so we talk to the people and talk to the suspect or whatnot and, hash things out. And he, no, I was in federal waters. I can show you on my GPS or, it's stuff like that. But when people post things and then they ignore you, that's kind of a bad thing.
It's not like we're going to get you for this, but maybe we keep an eye if we see you out on the reef from now on. Because you're somewhere in that middle ground.
Somewhere, exactly.
Well, yeah. So resource protection is kind of what you're focusing on in terms of investigations. But
yes.
Just kind of a little overview of the FWC. Like we have so many law enforcement agencies. When I drive from my house to the dive shop every day,
yes.
I see state troopers, I see
all
FWC, I see Monroe County. We got the Coast Guard out here.
Right.
So where is the overlapping jurisdiction with what y'all are dealing with? Like,
sure.
We deal with the Coast Guard and FWC a lot out on boating. So, like, who's handling what? I guess just kind of lay of the land.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
what do you get your hands dirty with in terms of this?
Yeah, so basically, Coast Guard's federal, and they're actually a branch of the military. Mm-hmm. So their authority is more like the migrant interdictions and things like that, drugs and whatnot, whereas ours is boating laws, resource laws. We are the designated agency, so whenever you see a fatality or a fatal boating accident, we are the ones that investigate that. We do everything from boating safety on these holiday weekends to BUIs and drunk boating. Like I said, crashes. Even if it's just his boat's at the dock, you come in a little too fast, hit his rub rail and scuff his fiberglass. We can, if it's under $2,000, we give you a self-report. So we do pretty much everything as far as anything that goes on the water. Now you do have Monroe County, they have a marine unit as well.
I guess where's the overlap there? That's interesting.
Right. They basically are Islamorada and Marathon. Okay. So they do have one in Key Largo, but I don't think he's full time. So the one in Islamorada is just basically near shore waters, which is state waters. Okay. Whereas we are deputized as federal officers as well. So we can go out to the reef and enforce the NOAA laws and the spearfishing out at the Key Largo site and things like that, which I'm sure we'll get into.
That actually answers one of the questions I'm going to have is a lot of the waters here, National Marine Sanctuaries,
yes,
ran by NOAA, the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation, all that kind of stuff.
Correct.
Saying that you're a federally licensed officer.
Yeah, federally deputized.
To take care of their rules. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I was wondering how the connection, the overlap was with the sanctuaries and NOAA and all that. So.
And NOAA does have an Office of Law Enforcement, which there's, I think, 2 or 3 guys in the Keys, and then they have a criminal investigator too. But they're just so thin. I mean, we are always thin too, but they're way more thin than we are. Mm-hmm. So we assist them by doing the marine sanctuary violations and things like that. Groundings, vessel groundings.
Ooh.
And, on the reef and the seagrass, the spearfishing stuff, fishing in the SPAs or the sanctuary preservation areas and things like that too. So,
all right.
Yeah, we do quite a bit.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to throw to another side. Just a little more of a controversial topic, not for us down here, but kind of around the world, just because I'm always curious in people's takes. And then we can kind of get into maybe some more of the rules and regulations. And also, if we don't think about it, commonly asked questions that you just get as an investigator, as somebody who's going out and actually talking to people on the boats. But before that, spearing on scuba. One of my posts I put on one of the dive shops, biggest response I got, and was super negative, but it was the most I ever got, was basically the rest of the world telling us, you guys are criminal in the U.S. for spearing on scuba.
Wow.
You know, it's free divers. It's too easy. You can get too many fish. First of all, we scare half them away with our bubbles. Personal opinion. But how do you feel about spearing on scuba versus free diving? Just more of a personal take.
Yeah, I mean, I personally, growing up here, I didn't see anything wrong with it, to be honest with you. And it's always been, you know, the law that you can do it. So, I mean, if you go to the Bahamas, it's not allowed, and they don't allow like a trigger mechanism on their spear gun. I know that, just a pole spear or Hawaiian sling. But, I mean, you're always going to get people that are going to, you know, go against whatever the law is, or, you know, things like that.
Well, you know, and whether it's the law or not, I believe it's done in a pretty conservation-minded way.
Sure.
And as somebody who's having to look at the resources and possibly even give suggestions to what rules should change from season to season.
For sure.
I don't know about you. You make a living off
I
it,
think
but
more often than not, the people making those negative comments don't actually spearfish themselves. So it's not even like it's free divers pointing the finger at scuba divers saying like, hey, that's not right.
Right.
Because they know we're scaring those grouper away when we're 20 feet away from them. You know, they're not too upset about it.
And not only that, you guys dive on these wrecks. How many times have you seen the fishing line all over everything? You're getting tangled. The hooks that go into the mooring line. I mean, that's way more damaging, I think, than anything a spear fisherman ever does. The worst they could do is lose a shaft. The fish swims off with it, you know?
Yeah.
So.
It's not like we're crazy effective when we're on scuba. I mean, yes, we can go deeper. If you can't free dive, then you can scuba dive.
Right.
But at the end of the day, we're blowing bubbles out every breath.
I think there's an assumption that you're down there for 45 minutes, we're down there for 30 seconds. You're
Yeah.
just bringing them in.
No,
Dude, my first
no.
10 trips out, I didn't catch anything.
Exactly.
I mean, if you want to get to that brass tacks, lobstering. Why do you think everybody comes down to the Keys for lobstering for mini season? Because it's shallow. Because they can free dive.
So
the
what
guys
if a
we
restriction came up and you can only lobster in 20 feet or more of water? You know, it'd be the same thing.
Yeah, exactly.
I think these people come out scuba diving with us and they think they're going to hit their limits. We as scuba diving professionals rarely hit our limits on a single dive. And then you go in 20 feet of water and you're having to pick and choose which ones to leave behind.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, speaking of lobstering, let's kind of get into that. It is middle of lobster season.
Yeah.
So I guess a big one we've actually been talking about a lot. That a lot of people get, you know, you're out here, you got to bring the lobster back to the dock.
Mm-hmm.
That's a thing. Whole.
Yes.
Cannot rip it up.
No
You got to
spearing.
measure it. No spearing lobster. All that kind of
Yes.
stuff. So where
measuring it in the water. Let's make that perfectly clear, because a lot of people, they have the misnomer that you're diving, you both have your bag of 6 or whatever, you come up and then you measure them on the boat. No. You measure them in the water before putting them in your bag. Yeah. So that is possession when you have in your bag. And we see it all the time as far as during mini season, where we'll have, say, one guy on a hookah rig, and he will come up, and he's the only diver, and he's got, let's say, 8 lobster. So, number one, he's over the bag limit because he's got 8. He's only allowed 6. And then he has 4 undersize in the bag. So, and he's like, oh, no, I was going to measure them when I get on the boat, and I've heard it a million times. Oh, no, we never take undersize. We always measure them when we get them on the boat. Well, that's not the point. The point is you're supposed to measure them before you put them in the bag, because legs break, antenna break, things like that.
Yeah. And when you come around the corner, you don't know if they just got on the boat, or those lobsters have been on the boat for the last half hour.
Exactly.
And they're waiting to see if they can get back to the dock without anybody checking.
Exactly. It's kind of the same thing when you're, say you go and fish offshore, and then you stop at Alligator Reef to hang out or have a beer or whatever, and we see fishing poles. They're not maybe actively fishing, but if we come up and say they didn't have a dive flag up and they're diving or snorkeling, we check them. Hey, do you have any fish? Yeah, I got fish. Well, now you're in a sanctuary and you're in possession of fish in the sanctuary. So there's no way for me to determine where they caught those fish, but they have the fishing gear and they have the fish in the sanctuary, and that's a no-go.
So if I want to spend time in the sanctuary after I go fishing, you're telling me I need to go back to the dock.
That's
I need
correct.
to offload this.
Yes.
There is no way I can store it, like all the fishing equipment in the forward hatch or something like that, because I've heard that be said, and I don't know if that's true.
I mean, that's kind of an officer discretion thing, but I mean, if you want to be on the safe side, I would say your best bet is to
Avoid
that. Yeah, I would say so.
Understood.
Yeah.
That's a good answer to give a lot of people, actually.
You know what I mean? I mean, it is officer discretion, and I mean, obviously someone is not going to catch a dolphin at Conch Reef. So, I mean, or mahi, so that's kind of, but if you have yellowtail or grouper, or even lobster, there's no, and dive gear, there's no way for me to tell.
Now, if I wanted to throw all my fishing gear on there, I don't have any fish. We go to the sanctuary. We're going to go fish after. Completely
Totally fine. Yes. It's when you have the fish or the product in the no-take zone.
Understood.
Yes.
All right.
Can I ask a question on that?
For
Yeah.
sure.
So, like, when I do a charter, for example, obviously I try to make that stop at the famous Alligator Lighthouse before we go and harvest any fish, if that's the interest,
Right.
But if, let's say, we go outside the sanctuary and we shoot a couple snapper, and then they want to get a picture inside the sanctuary, and they're not diving, not getting in the water, and I've got spear gun racks on my boat, so the guns are, you can see them a mile away, they're sitting upright.
Right.
If we go and put those spear guns away in the hatches, secure it away, and then we're inside the sanctuary hanging out, is that allowed?
I think that would be fine.
Yeah. But it gets messy when people are in the water and then there's spear guns on the boat and they're just laying on the deck.
Correct.
It's
Yes.
A little bit of leeway for that drive-by photo. Just don't go hang out for 2 hours and have a beer.
And that actually leads me into another thing. In talking about the Key Largo existing management area, basically it runs from Molasses Reef all the way to the Dade County line. Mm-hmm. So that area is after you have state waters, there's federal waters. Well, that portion of federal waters, like say the Spiegel Grove, is closed out until you get to 300 feet of water. So you actually cannot possess spear guns legally in the Key Largo existing management area. That's a violation. So if you have spear guns in your rack and you're, say, stopped and you're just diving and snorkeling around for lobster, that's a violation.
That's asking for trouble.
It's got to be stored in a way, and you shouldn't stop on your way in.
Can't be easily accessible. Just
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, you guys have to assume the worst when you roll up. It's
Right. I mean, we get lied to all the time and things like
I
that.
know,
So it's we have to, somebody that's like my tenure has seen pretty much almost everything.
So I want to take kind of that concept just one step further. I have a real desire to go sailing, do a couple days out, go up and down. So if I caught fish, I'm sailing and I'm planning on staying out on the cut this whole time.
Yes.
I can't. How do you visit a sanctuary? Can you put it in the freezer? I can't bring it back to the dock to rip the, where is the line there with people that aren't actually coming in and out of the area? They're staying out in the water for multiple days.
Right.
I want to catch my own fish. I'm going to be staying somewhat inland, does that make sense what I'm asking?
Right. Yeah. I think I understand what you're asking.
Because I know, for example, if we caught a fish and we lit the grill and started cleaning it, technically that is legal, right? I could cook that fish out on the boat if we're spending the whole day out there?
That's a tough question.
Okay.
You're allowed, I don't know as far as what we have as far as regulations, as far as, cooking and cleaning it right there. I mean, I think if you're at anchor and spending the night, I wouldn't think it would be a big deal. Mm-hmm. Whereas we get a lot of times we'll get somebody that, say, goes to the Dry Tortugas where you can go overnight. Mm-hmm. And they're like, oh, well, I'm going to the Dry Tortugas. no, you can have a 1-day bag limit coming
Okay.
back unless it's a manifested trip. So if it's a manifested trip, like if you're on one of the private charter boats that go out there and things like that, then you can have more than a 1-day bag limit because there's no way for us to know.
Exactly.
So,
Okay. It's just, it's an interesting concept because I have like some friends who live on sailboats out here.
right.
And so they're like, technically, I feel like I'm breaking the law every time I'm cooking up my catch from the day.
Right.
Now, they usually don't go out on that boat. They take another boat out. They come back in.
Right.
They stay on that boat.
Right.
But I was just wondering as a
It's
concept.
kind of like an officer discretion thing, I think, more than anything else.
If
as
it's
far
clear
as,
you're living on it, nobody's going to really
Right.
push you.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So something I kind of was told recently, like within the last month, is I thought that if the fish was, let's say it's just a fish, let's say it's a mangrove snapper, if you're preparing it for immediate consumption, you're allowed to, fillet it and cook it and all that on the water. Because, I've always been taught you need to land it whole. If it's a grouper, if it's a lobster, something like that, you need to land it whole. But if it was for immediate consumption, you could cook it at the sandbar, let's say.
I'm not going to answer that because I don't know the answer to it. I'm going to
Yeah.
have to get back to you on that.
Yeah. And that's something I've only heard within like the last month.
Right.
You know?
I would literally have to look it up and see because I don't want to give the wrong answer.
Yeah. And I heard that too, and then I thought, like, well, if we get a grouper or something like that, and a grouper has to be black grouper, 24 inches,
Right.
usually bigger if it's on my boat, and you're not going to be able to cook that whole thing at the sandbar, and then you're left
Right.
with half a grouper, and it's still got a fillet on it, and it's just that's an
Right.
egregious violation
Yeah,
getting back to the dock.
Exactly. Exactly. But no, I'll definitely look that one up and get back to you on that one.
Yeah.
All right. Well, speaking of bag limits and things like that, how are these established over time, as far as you know? Because I know, like, right when I first came to the Keys, the rules on lobstering went from it has to hook to now it has to be over or something like that with the 3 inches, and hogfish went down in size, and these things change from year to year sometimes.
Right.
So who's establishing this? I mean, I'm assuming NOAA or something, but who's establishing these specific size limits? And how often do you get pushback on those?
A lot of it goes with the FWRI, which is the Florida Wildlife Research Institute, who's basically the scientists. So they do the studies and the fish surveys and things like that. The only thing that I can think of that's recently changed was hogs went from 12 to 16 fork length, and then they did a barracuda. They did a slot limit on that, and then you can have 1 trophy as well. And muttons went from 16 to 18, fairly recent, and the bag limit on muttons went from 10 to 5.
And so I'm assuming that's happening because they're seeing decrease in populations. Things like that.
Correct. Yeah, it's because of the user amount of people, because they see the YouTube videos. Oh, I want to try spearfishing, and they see the different, people out there with making all these videos and social media and things like that. So I think the popularity, and with COVID probably as well, it went way up because one of the things that you could do was go out on the boat. So that has a high factor as far as that goes.
And Jordi, what are you seeing when people show up for a charter first time fishing?
Well,
they've got something in mind, right?
Yep. They watched YouTube all day the day before, or they watched it before they booked the trip.
Of course.
And they're watching these videos that took them 4 hours to film, and then they're only seeing 5 minutes of them just shoot to some EDM reel, and they think that's
so
what they're going to
funny.
experience when they get out there, and
Yeah.
it's. And then they also have a misconception of, well, there's regulations. And then when you tell them that, then they get a little bit more serious about it. And they realize, okay, they have to be a certain size and all that.
Right.
But they have, sometimes, thanks to YouTube, some crazy expectations. And we kind of need to bring that down a little bit before we get on the boat and get out there.
That's funny that you bring up the, the 4 hour trip.
Sometimes way more than 4 hours.
Oh,
too.
yeah, for sure. I mean, there's times that I'll go out all day and, I'll get like 2 fish.
Yeah.
Or none.
Yeah.
Or, I'll maybe get some lobster, but
think
not
we
my
had
bag limit.
One each from 4 dives over like a 5-hour trip the last time you and I went out.
Yeah. And for what we're doing, that's plenty. I mean, a lot of times we go
that's
out and
more
it's
than enough for my freezer.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, that's another question too. Like with the lobstering, like we don't need to get our limit every time we go. It's just.
I get
Yeah.
first day of season, you're excited.
Yeah.
You're all going to have a big
Right.
old party.
Yeah.
But after that,
Or you only come down.
Two's enough. That's either going to feed me well
Yeah.
or me and somebody
Yeah.
mediocrely.
And
Right,
lobster's much better fresh than it is frozen. So
Yeah.
I don't need to freeze,
Yeah.
4 tails and then only eat 2 fresh. I'd rather go get them the next week, and if they're gone, they're gone. But
Right.
you don't want to clear out that spot.
No, for sure.
Okay, so something just clicked with lobster too.
Sure.
I remember seeing FWC posting this guy, like 2 people went on a boat and they came back with like 112 lobster and they got caught. And first of all, dumbasses. What are you doing? Like, I think even if you didn't know the law, you know this isn't okay, right?
You would hope. I don't know what people think and their actions, but
So, you got 112 lobster. They were taken illegally. They're already on the dock and they're dead. What do y'all do with this?
so in a case like that, they'll probably going to take them depending on the jurisdiction where it's taken. We like say I get a lobster case and it's 3 undersize. We always take photos and with the gauge on them and things like that. Take photos, and then we return them to the resource. So people are in the misconception that, we donate them to wherever, or usually we don't. We usually deposit them back to the resource because it's a quality control thing. So we don't know where they've been, especially fish. We don't know whether they've been properly iced and things like that. I've seen some fish in a bucket that the gills are so flared out that because they weren't in ice, it was in hot water. And I'm not going to donate that even to the bird center, you know. No. That's not going to happen. So as far as like that amount, that's probably going to be bagged and taken into our evidence, and then just for trial purposes. So
Smaller amounts, so we're putting them back in the water, so the food value goes back into
it goes
the
back
ecosystem.
into the resource. Either a fish will eat it, or crabs, or a nurse shark, or whatever. So
I had no idea what
barracuda.
you did with it, so that's actually good to know.
Yeah, that's generally what it. It's small quantities.
And I can see why somebody's first thought is soup kitchen. You gotta feed it to some, but that makes a lot of sense. You don't know. Usually, I guess if people are not doing it the right way, they might not be doing the whole thing the right way.
Right, and it is contraband. Like the thing is you'll see we'll get say we get a case where you shoot some undersized hogs and they're like, oh man, you're gonna throw that away, and it's like, no, we can't allow you to keep it because it's contraband. It's not of legal size.
Because if so, then that's just hey, here's $1,000 fee for your undersized. No, then you're just paying for the privilege. That's
right. Yeah,
it's going to encourage more of it.
Exactly.
Jordi, what?
I think that's a big surprise to people when they start spearfishing is, if they do happen to unfortunately shoot a fish that's undersized, well, if that comes on the boat, because we can't measure it underwater. Right? It's not usually, but that's a big surprise to them when we come on the boat where you say, well, we got to throw it back. But now it goes to waste. Well, if that was the case for everybody, then everybody would accidentally shoot the undersized fish and then get to bring it home. So people need to understand that.
Correct.
It doesn't matter if it was a genuine accident. We got to throw it back because of the unfortunate few that would take advantage of it if that was the case. You know?
And just let me bring up something. You're actually leading me into something. Ice does not shrink fish. just so we have that. Ice does not.
Is that your number one excuse?
We hear it a lot.
Hey, it's just a little cold in here, I swear.
It's shrunk in the ice. That's one of ours that we hear all the time. And I think they did a study, and it's like maybe like an eighth of an inch. It's really not. No, that's
not going to
cross
cross
a
that
misnomer.
line just tiny.
No, that's a
You're just measuring
misnomer.
it differently now that law enforcement's nearby.
That's right.
Well, let's talk about measuring. People are, do you smush the fish? Some got it from the fork. Some got it from,
Right.
What are you seeing out there? People, their biggest excuse besides, it's just a little cold in here.
Right.
So I swear to God.
Unfortunately, we do see a lot of the mahi is one that's fork length, and people do total length, which is the full length of the fish and the tail. Like thinking of the tail being here and the fork being here, it's to this portion, not to this portion. Like a grouper is total length, which is all the way to the end. But like the hogfish is another one, it's fork length because their tail goes out kind of like a broom, and you know. So that's what we see a lot of, unfortunately. People not knowing how to measure and just being ill-prepared, I think. And they just don't follow the rules, and they just go out and do it. And just because they see it on YouTube or whatever, and they think, oh, this is going to be cool. But, you know, I had one the other day. I was like, hey, do you know the spearfishing laws? They were like, yeah, it's 100 yards offshore. I'm like, no.
It's a little more complicated than that, buddy.
Yeah. So it was did not end well for that person.
Yeah, I get some calls sometimes where I'm happy. I'm like grateful that people gave me a call, because they don't know who to call to actually ask about those regulations.
For sure.
And they'll hit me with something like that, like, oh, I only need to be 150 feet offshore to shoot a fish. I'm like, no, please don't do that.
And you know, honestly, we are really hard to get a hold of. We're dispatched not locally. We're out of Lake Worth. So for you, and then you got to go through a menu. Oh, Monroe County, Dade County, Collier County, because we're three separate counties that are in. It's called SRB, which is our region. So for you to put that information out is fantastic.
Yeah.
You know, thank you.
Yeah, no,
honestly.
spearfishing's in the name, so when they Google it, I think they get desperate and they just hit the first call button they see on Google.
Perfect.
And I don't mind letting them know, just because that's going to be a 4-hour stop for you guys when they're...
and one of the things that I see is, you know, people going to buy a spear gun. They come down here, they go to buy a spear gun, and they have no idea about the regs. Oh, but I bought this at X shop.
Yeah.
Not naming any names, but and you've got somebody that's, you know, a young person in there that probably doesn't spearfish, or no, they're just a retail associate, so they're not getting the good advice about the local customs and regulations.
Yeah, I think a lot of people underestimate the amount of research that goes into it, especially if you don't have a dad or a grandfather or somebody that teaches you how to do it.
For sure.
And they just walk into a store, buy a gun, and then go out. And it's not like it's a firearm or something, or they're going hunting up north or something. You know, it's a lot harder for somebody to do that up north as opposed to coming down here, going to Divers Direct, buying a gun, and then there they are in front of Founders Park, spearing on the jetty.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So it's unfortunate, but any kind of research or insight you can give out to the public is much appreciated from our perspective. Because I'll answer questions all day. You know, we have had people call into our dispatch and ask, oh, I'm coming down on vacation and I want to know the spearfishing laws or regulations. So we have no problem. We're not out to get somebody is what I'm trying to convey. You know, we want to educate the people and things like that. So.
Well, then, what ways are y'all educating?
What's that?
What ways are y'all educating then?
Oh, I mean, like I said, we've got these brochures about the spearfishing regulations.
See them in every shop I walk into down here. They're in our dive shops. They're at Divers Direct. They're at the spearing shops down the road.
Everywhere.
Yes.
Yeah, they're everywhere.
I love that y'all got that out, at least as a base start.
Yeah, absolutely. And it pretty much spells everything out, I think, as far as what you can and can't do in the Keys as far as spearfishing. So if you want to get into that, we can. I don't know if you had anything else. I'm sure you do.
I don't have any specific questions that I want to get into. I kind of want you to more give.
Sure.
Say somebody's like, I was planning on coming to the Keys. I want to go spearing, or I have my own boat. You know, I'm not going to go with a dive shop that knows how to do it. They got a little bit of bravado, but they really need that information. How do I get started with this, even though if I'm not going with the guide? Because they could come down to Islamorada Dive Center, go with us. We do it off the charters. They could go with Jordi. He runs a private charter 7 days a week. So there's options, you know, depending on your budget to learn how to spear. But a lot of people...
Or they want to rent a boat, or they want to bring their own. And
give them the baseline. How can they start this without messing up, whether it's downloading an app, watching certain videos, or just the basic rules and regulations?
Right. Well, like you said, we have this brochure. This is the basic rules and regulations. So the first thing it's got on here is spearfishing is prohibited in the following areas of Monroe County. So it says state waters from Long Key, which is the island of Long Key, to Miami-Dade County. There's no spearfishing. So that includes waters known as the Upper Keys and also John Penny Camp. there's no spearfishing. You can't even possess a spear gun in John Pennekamp or any state park. So that's closed. Everglades, Florida Bay is right out here on the right out here from us. So you can't spearfish there. Never have been able to. It's a national park. Dry Tortugas, same thing for the people going down south. And then it lists all the state parks. This is the 100 yards between beaches, piers, and bridges. 100 yards of public swimming beach or any commercial or fishing or public fishing pier or part of a bridge from which public fishing is allowed. So you can't go, even though it would be legal, you can't go right next to Long Key Bridge and spearfish because it's a fishing pier.
That's once you get further down south, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. So not off Islamorada, not off... Okay.
No, not at all. Okay. No spear guns in the water
in
Islamorada, in state waters. And then we get into what's called the Key Largo existing management area. So what that is, and there's one in Lou Key as well. So it says, possession of spearfishing equipment within these existing management areas is prohibited except when transiting through the area without stopping, like we talked about earlier. You just keep going.
It's like firearm rules with the interstate. You can drive through, but if you stop more than use the bathroom, it's illegal.
Exactly. So Key Largo, the EMA is adjacent to Pennekamp, and it goes all the way out to 300 feet of water. So they did that in the 60s, and when Pennekamp was established, so they backpacked on or piggybacked on with Pennekamp. Mm-hmm. So they made it so where they're protecting the resource, because of that sole factor. The feds did that. The same with Lou Key down south off of Summerlin, Ramrod area. And then, of course, the spas, which are the yellow buoyed areas. There's no spearfishing there or no fishing. There is trolling in some of them, like alligator is troll and release and conch is troll and release up here. So let's see what else.
So you can... you can catch and release alligator, just to be clear.
Yes.
Okay. A lot of people don't know that, so when they see a rod and reel there near the lighthouse, they start freaking out. They're like, call the cops. I'm like, if they release it, it's fine.
Right.
You might get boarded, but...
Yes. Now, and it's funny because my boat's unmarked, so I'll see people during the summer in Conch Reef trolling, right? And I'm like, okay, they're trolling, that's fine. But then they'll hook something, a barracuda or whatever, bring it in the boat and land it. Then that's when I go get them.
Yeah.
Because now they're not trolling and releasing, they're actually harvesting.
And when they release, does it have to be over the side of the gunnel?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
But let's say it's a barracuda. Can they bring it into the boat?
Yeah, as long as it goes back into the water.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not going to be that,
Gotcha.
But if it goes in your fish box, that's a
couple minutes
problem.
go by and it gets weird. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Or they put it directly into the fish box, then, that's an issue.
Okay.
Let's see. So this is basically showing the boundary lines: Biscayne National Park, Everglades, John Pennekamp, and then the different spas and things like that. And that's pretty much it as far as that goes. I mean,
so this PDF's got a lot more information than what he just shown. There's a downloadable link of this, I believe, on FWC's website.
I think so.
I'm going to find that link. I'm going to put it in the description below for anybody who's come in to check it out.
Perfect.
It's a good place to be.
Yeah, for sure.
But Jordi, do you have, as entrepreneur in the area, started your own spear business, you have any questions for him in terms of things that happen or affect your day to day, like trying to make a living down here?
Yeah. Yes, I know. One, I just wanted to clarify. So for spearfishing in the Upper Keys down here, so you got to be 3 miles offshore, and it's 3 nautical miles, right? Not 3 miles. And
yes.
A lot of people get that wrong, and there's a couple really nice reefs that would be great to spear at that are only 3 miles offshore, but you need to be 3 nautical miles.
That is correct.
Yeah.
Yes, 3 nautical miles, exactly.
Which is greater than a regular mile.
That's right, and it's from the furthest point of land. So, say Rodriguez Key It sits out from Key Largo.
But you mark it from Rodriguez
It's
Key?
from Rodriguez Key is where the point of land goes.
This isn't a straight line.
That's correct.
Squiggling down.
With all the technology we have now, most people have a GPS, and that's on there. And I show them when I stop them. I'll show them, look, this line is fluid. It moves. It's not, straight across the board. So, you can have dips and things like that. Like, it's not going to be like out towards Davis. You don't have the landmass, so it's closer in. Whereas like Conch, you have Tavernier Key, so it's going to be further out. So and the same with Rodriguez as well. But yeah, 3 nautical miles. That's a good point.
Yeah, I may have gotten in trouble when I was younger once because of that. But
not by me though.
No.
Okay.
No. I knew better though.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah, like let me see what I've got here. I took some notes.
Sure.
Well, while he's looking that up, best story in terms of just, I can't believe they even tried to get away with this.
Oh, that's a
if
good
you can
one.
share it.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
So
I know
it's
you're
actually
lying.
recently.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, July. So we were out at a reef in Key Largo. I'm watching them. They had no dive flag. Guy in the water. 2 guys in the water. Girl in the boat. Watching them. I'm like, I know they're spearfishing. Go up and he drops he dove down and dropped the gun. So he's interfering with an investigation at that point. And I am solo by myself. So I told them, get on the boat. And they're like, no, the gun's broken. The gun's broken. So they had another spear gun on the boat, and they're in penny camp. And so I'm going through their fish. Well, I read him his rights and things like that to ask him questions. And he's got, black grouper violation, a mutton snapper violation. He's like, oh, no. And he was real, like, sketchy, kind of nervous. He's like, oh, blah, blah, blah. And I'm doing my stuff. And then I happened to look back, and he had a hogfish under a towel, and it was small. I was like, come on, you're going. So he went to jail. And then later on, we had another. I'm on the dive team as well for the department, and another guy came out the next day, and he dove up that spear gun. So we got the spear gun too. So it was, and then the guy was basically crying that I was taking him to jail, but he lied to me. He wasn't cooperative and things like that. I mean, if you're cooperative and things like that, obviously you're gonna, and don't lie, you're gonna get the benefit of the doubt by any of our officers.
I mean, it's the difference between you get pulled over, you were speeding. Do you know what you're doing? I messed up. I'm not gonna fight you on this.
Yeah. Correct.
And no, your radar's messed up, dude.
Right. The side of the road or the side of the waterway is not the time to argue. That's what court's for, and I tell people that. Yeah. And it's like, as long as people are honest and upfront, it's when you try to lie that we really don't appreciate it, because we do have a job to do at the day's end, so, and that's what we're out there for. Yeah.
That being said, though, like, ignorance of the law and regulations down here isn't a free ticket out of
that is correct.
Small hogfish and small grouper on the boat.
Exactly. Yeah. Ignorant. Oh, I didn't know. I didn't know. Well, there's so many medias out there now, as far as we have the printed books. We have Fish Rules app. We have.
That's a great app.
Yeah, it is.
Jordi put me on that, and that's where I've learned most of my
info. It literally picks up your exact location, and you
Correct.
can't go wrong. Whereas, before you'd have to look it up and know if you're in that special permit zone or whatever it is. And this one, there's no excuses with this app.
Exactly. If you're in an SPA or a sanctuary, it shows you harvesting restricted, and it shows in red. Because I've shown people that are in the sanctuary, I'll be like, look, this is what it says. So. But no, that is a very good point, and a good app as well. So, I mean, there's so many different medias and things like that. I think, there really isn't an excuse now. And during lobster season, we have the lobster booth, and I ask people, oh, did you stop at the lobster booth? They're like, oh, no, I didn't know. But you're coming down here specifically to lobster. Why wouldn't you try to get the most up-to-date information that you possibly could, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember this past mini season, right in front of your guys' office, or your station on Will Harbor up there. It was a stormy mini season,
Right.
But there was, you can't be lobstering that close to shore during mini season in the first 5 days of regular sports season, right?
Right.
Is
Yeah,
it
that's
300 feet?
Yeah, through 300 feet and developed properties.
Right.
Yeah.
And they were just right there, right off the bridge, right in front of FWC
Right.
station, and it was just. You can tell they never looked up any regulation before they came down. A lot of them weren't even on boats. They were just pulled over right on the side of the highway.
Yeah.
Not to mention the hazard that is everybody right there with the amount of boats.
Exactly. And like you said, I think the weather kind of drove people in as well.
Yeah.
So maybe that had something to do with it. But yeah, that is definitely a good point.
Yeah.
Well, do you have any kind of final remarks, information that maybe you see is not getting out to people enough these days in terms of rules and regulations that you're dealing with often, or just final thoughts about people boating in the Keys?
Yeah, I mean, just as far as I think we've pretty much discussed everything as far as, the different things that they have available to them and rules and regs and whatnot. And just hopefully that people understand that, the fish population is dwindling. So if you shoot that 12-inch hogfish, that you're hurting things for future generations. And it's just, I mean, it's not like it used to be.
Yeah.
I don't know how long.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember if you said how long you've been down here, but
I moved down here when I was about 8 or 9 years old.
Okay.
And then grew up here ever since.
right.
So yeah, I mean, you've seen a huge difference in, whether it's people coming down here or the shark population increasing or
Right.
the Goliath groupers.
Right.
A lot of it's changed. And there's a picture I want to share with you.
Sure.
I don't know if you know Cam Kirkconnell.
No.
He's a famous spearfisherman, to say the least. That's kind of an understatement.
Right.
And he posted this picture, and you might get a kick out of this. I don't know if you can download it and share it. So that's 1990 and then 2022, and it might be, a little bit of an exaggeration, but
Wow.
I think it kind of characterizes what we're kind of going through down here. There's a lot more fishermen, there's more sharks, and then we've got less grouper, less snapper to fish.
Wow. Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah, send that to me, Jordi.
Yeah.
I'll put it up.
And
on
I
the
don't think
screen.
he'd care if you share it because he's pretty passionate about it.
Yeah.
But it seems like there's more sharks than ever right now, and
Really?
and everybody's getting sharked if you're fishing off the reef or on a wreck.
That's making some people upset and wanting to dwindle the shark population, which we can't do either.
Yeah, but I think isn't there a daily bag limit on a bull shark? Can you do one per day depending on where you are?
I would have to look it up. I'm not positive.
I don't see myself ever putting one on the deck.
Yeah.
But,
I was just shocked when we were at the Eagle to see a shark head on a hook down there.
Really?
At depth.
Yeah.
I was swimming by and was like, did something kill this? And I realized it was being pulled up by
Somebody was fishing.
Fishing with it, using it as bait.
Really?
Yeah, you were there with me. I was so confused.
It was just a bull shark head. I remember it just resting on the bottom. So it seems like somebody killed it or something and then released it. So in my mind, I imagine somebody was fishing on the ball in the Eagle, and then that shark probably kept taking their fish, and then they put a big old hook on a piece of bait, and they finally hooked the shark, and then they probably dispatched it.
I mean, the hook was still in it, and it was just moving around. That's why I thought it was.
Yeah, it was probably just a little bit of current.
Yeah, I'm not sure. And we were doing so much that day, I forgot to ask you about it. But I was just like, I've never seen a half-dead shark on the reef. I've seen a couple half-eaten turtles, but never a shark.
And this isn't really a popular opinion, because there's a lot of people out there who want to protect the sharks, which is great. But in certain areas, I feel like we've done it too much. There's been too many efforts to, you call them shark influencers. And they try all these efforts to protect sharks, but at the end of the day, there's a balance,
Right.
And if there's too many sharks, and then you've got, fleets of fishermen going out of Bud and Mary's, outdoor sportsmen and all that, if they go out there and they're setting hooks and they're trying to catch grouper and deep drop, and you got all these sharks,
right?
Well, now they're all getting a free lunch, and now you have less grouper, less snapper. Those fishermen are staying on those spots longer, trying to get their grouper for their customers.
Yeah.
And now you're left with a smaller population of grouper and snapper, and then you've got sharks that had their meal, and then they're going to do the same thing the next day,
Yeah.
Well, just teach them to scuba, give them a spear gun, and tell them to go fight the shark on their own. Come on, man. Oh. Well, that's all I got question-wise for you. So
Okay.
unless you got any final remarks, we're coming up on maybe 45 minutes, 50 minutes. So
Yeah.
probably a good time to wrap it up. But
Yeah, that
I really
sounds good.
appreciate you coming down.
For
This
sure.
is awesome. The
Yeah.
opportunity to actually ask an investigator straight to his face a bunch of these
Yeah,
questions.
absolutely.
Keep doing what
Pleasure.
you're doing in terms of, I know you've been going to some bars around here and set up meetups and things like that. But
Right.
hopefully this can be a resource when you can't do that or people are asking. You can send it out as some basic information. And when I put it out, I'll send you the description. If there's anything
Okay.
you want to add into it in terms of links or resources, we can make
Sure.
sure that gets out to the right people.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Thank you very much, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Anchor Lines podcast. Do us a favor, if you haven't left a review, leave it on iTunes or Spotify. And if you haven't followed us on Instagram, @Anchor Lines Podcast. We'll see you for the next one.